Mr. President.
The senator from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, I read with a lot of interest the trip to China that was made by President Obama, meeting with President Xi in China over what they characterized as an agreement on greenhouse gas emissions. I didn't hear any kind of an agreement from anything that was said by the president of China. And they have been talking about this as a historic breakthrough. You know, that's exactly what they said in 2009, back when Copenhagen was the center stage for the big annual party, so that people are aware of what goes on once a year. The United Nations throws a big party trying to get countries who agree to reduce their greenhouse gases by certain amounts to come in. It's kind of interesting. One of the first ones I went to, I saw a good friend of mine from Benin in West Africa, and I went up to him. I said, "You guys are not sucked into this thing. I know that for a fact in terms of having any kind of reduction in greenhouse gases. I mean, what would happen to the economy of West Africa if you did that?" They said, "Of course we're not, but this is the biggest party of the year." And so they're all going to be there. And, you know, and the same thing was true in Copenhagen. But before mentioning that, just look at what they called a major historic breakthrough between the United States and China, where the president pledged to reduce the emissions in the United States between 26 and 28% by 2025. Now, what did China agree to? Now, first of all, even if they did agree to reducing emissions, we wouldn't believe them because they never stand up for, or they don't end up doing what they say they're going to do in these agreements. But what he says he's going to do is stop increasing its CO2 emissions by 2030. In other words, for the next between now and 2030, they're going to continue to increase their levels of CO2 emissions, which, you know, I agree that they're going to do that. Now, next year, that's a year from December, there's going to be another big party. It's going to be in Paris. And it's going to be the one where the President Obama says that he and President Xi from China have an agreement. But, of course, that's going to be kind of like it was in Copenhagen back in 2009. In 2009, I remember that so well. At that time, I was and still am on the Environment Public Works Committee. We had a wonderful lady who was the President Obama's appointee to be the director of the EPA. And at that time in Copenhagen, they had already had Congresswoman Pelosi, Senator Boxer, President Obama, then Senator John Kerry, all of them over there promising the 191 countries that were in Copenhagen that we were going to pass some kind of a cap and trade. And so after that was over, I went over and I went a quick round trip to Copenhagen. I always remember I was only on the ground after all that travel for 3 hours, but I think it's probably the most enjoyable 3 hours I ever had because I was able to be over there as a one-man truth squad and to say to the people that were attending that great meeting there, that the United States was not going to pass any kind of cap and trade bill. In fact, they wouldn't have the very most votes they could have in the United States Senate at that time. And now the Senate is changing, as we all know, as we're speaking now. At that time was 30 votes. And obviously it took a lot more than that to do it. So I went over there as the one-man truth squad to say that they were not telling you the truth, and there's no way in the world we're going to be passing it. And the same thing is true this time. I'll tell you what this meeting reminds me of. The meeting that took place over in China a couple of days ago with our president there reminded me of the meeting that took place in, where was it, South America? In Rio de Janeiro. In Rio de Janeiro. This would have been in 1998. That's when, during the Clinton White House, and they went over there and agreed and signed the Kyoto Treaty. Now, they signed the treaty knowing for a fact it was not going to be ratified by the Senate. We know it takes a supermajority to ratify in the Senate. We had at that time a resolution that was passed. It was called the Byrd-Hagel Resolution. And the Byrd-Hagel Resolution said that we will not ratify any agreement like Kyoto or anything like that that didn't do two things, that either was harmful to the economy or didn't treat all countries the same. In other words, have to treat the reductions in China the same as they would be in the United States. Of course, the Kyoto Treaty didn't do that. And they knew at the time that it was not going to be ratified. In fact, they weren't even going to submit it for ratification to this body. And so that's exactly what did happen. Now, let's look at what's happening in China right now. China is doing pretty well. Between 2005 and 2011, China added roughly 2 600 megawatt coal-fired power plants a week. That's 2 power plants a week. In 7 years, China added more coal capacity to its fleet than existed in the entire the United States. And this is not going to be slowing down in the years to come. By his own admission, it's going to be increasing in the next, between now and 2030. China's expected to bring a new coal-fired power plant online every 10 days to give its hungry economy some electricity that it demands. So China is now the largest consumer and importer of coal in the world. It's kind of interesting. We're going through this the shale revolution in this country. Wonderful things are happening here. All of a sudden, we find out if we did not have the resistance coming from the White House, we could be totally independent of any other nation for our production of energy. And China, on the other hand, doesn't have the shale, doesn't have the oil, doesn't have the gas, and they don't have the coal, but they can import the coal, and that's exactly what they're doing. And so they'll continue to do that. Now, stop and think. You know, if you don't like the arguments, just use logic. Why would China ever agree unilaterally to reduce its emissions when that's the only way that they can produce electricity? Right now, and I have talked to them before, I've talked to people from China who kind of smile. They laugh at us and say, wait a minute, you say that you're going to believe us, that we're going to reduce our emissions? We applaud the United States. We want the United States to reduce its emissions because if they do that, as a manufacturing base has to leave the United States looking for energy, they come to China. So it's to their advantage to continue with their increases in emissions. And that's exactly what is going to happen. Let me just finish. We're going to be talking about this a lot. I plan to be chairing the Environment Public Works Committee. I chaired that several years ago when Republicans were a majority. Republicans are now a majority again. So we're going to look at these things logically, and we're going to conduct ourselves in a way that is not going to give the United States of America the largest single tax increase in history. You know, a lot of us, way back in the beginning, in 2001, in that time frame, they thought there's actually some truth to the global warming thing, and a lot of people are trying to resurrect that now. However, at that time, people did believe it. They didn't know what the cost is going to be. Shortly after that, it was the MIT, the Charles Rivers Associate, and the Wharton School. They came out with an approximation as to what it would cost in the way of a tax increase for the American people if we were to adopt the global warming provisions that they want to adopt. And it was between $300 and $400 billion a year. And then if you follow that with a statement, not from me and not from anyone else on the floor of the Senate, but from the Lisa Jackson, who was the director of the EPA appointed by President Obama. I asked her the question on the record. Let's say that we go ahead and pass one of these resolutions. The resolutions have been offered since 2002. The first one was offered by McCain and Lieberman. The last one by my good friend Senator Markey, who was then in the House. I said, if we were to pass any of these, and the largest increase in history, would this have the effect of reducing greenhouse gases? Her answer, this is Lisa Jackson, director of the EPA. No, it wouldn't. Because this isn't where the problem is. The problem is in China, it's in India, it's in Mexico. And that would not affect the overall world emissions of CO2. So for those who really believe that there's going to be something that comes before in the form of a treaty, as our president has said would happen in Paris 13 months from now. Just keep in mind, this is something that isn't going to happen, and the same as it wasn't going to happen in Copenhagen. The American people are not ready. They've already studied this issue. They know the science is not there, and what they want to do is to avoid any kind of a negative effect on our economy, and that's exactly what I think will happen. I see my good friend is up, and I will yield the floor.